What's up, peeps? Chris Santiago with another video topic for you. And today, I kind of want to get into, something that I think there are people talking about it, but maybe not as much as I'd like to see. And that's about really, if you see the title of this video, you'll kind of know where I'm going with this. But anyway, basically what this video and what this topic is really about is the division that's going on not only within this country but in this world, really. When you kind of get into these certain spaces, I used to be very, very heavy into politics, right? We're talking about 4 or 5 years, ever since 2020. And that's basically what my life was kind of revolved around, was just politics. I was very heavily into crypto back then, but that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that my view of the division really came down between liberal and conservative, right versus left, and Republican versus Democrat. That's kind of where the division I saw was like the ultimate divide. Counteracting people, again, not only within this country, within this world. Now, obviously, if you're talking about Republican and Democrat, that's strictly an American thing. But on a bigger worldwide type of consensus, it was left versus right. But the more I started thinking about it, and the more I don't want to say that I kind of skewed away from politics, even though I'm not nearly as political as I used to be back then. Um, the more I got into this kind of men's living, I don't know what you want to call it, men's living spaces. I'm not MGTOW, I'm not men's rights, I'm not any of that shit. I'm just me. But if you want to group me into the so-called manosphere, so be it. Whatever. I really don't give a fuck. But anyway, I say all that to say this, that the more I, dug deeper into it, the more I started realizing that all this left, right, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative division really goes down to a much deeper, more fundamental level. And what am I talking about? Well, I guess you can kind of, infer that from the title of this video. The establishment, whatever you want to call them, the system, the higher ups, if you're an X Files fan like me, the syndicate, whatever. But what we like to, really refer to them as is as the establishment, right? Um, Again, if you want to get down to an even deeper level of division, you have to go beyond liberal. You have to go beyond conservative. You have to go beyond politics. You have to go beyond even culture in many ways. And if you boil everything down to its most fundamental level, you have two groups that make up this world. You have two groups that have decided the very path that civilization has gone in. And what are those two groups? That is men versus women. And that's what I really think is going on here. And a lot of guys who are in this space have recognized that from the very beginning. And I think a lot of them really by accident. You know what I mean? They like to say that, oh, I don't get into these, politics. I don't get into this and that, even though they obviously have their own political leanings, which is there's nothing wrong with that. Um, but I think that they don't choose to engage in the so-called culture war because they recognize this much deeper division that's going on. And as much as I'd like to say that I'm not too much of a religious guy, I do believe in God. I do consider myself a Christian, but not like the whole, I don't want to put it in any kind of disparaging terms, Bible thumper type stuff. I never consider myself that type of person, but, I am spiritual to a degree. And, the more you think about it, especially coming from a, kind of a theological background, you can really sit there and see that, okay, the fundamental division that's going on between male and female, these days really harkens back to, old biblical stories. I mean, you go back to the old Genesis story of Adam and Eve, right? Well, Adam was in the garden alone, and God saw him and said, "Well, it's not right. It's not good for man to be alone. So what did he do? He took a piece of his rib and he created a human female. He created Eve. And from that very beginning point, man and women were always set to be they were always set to be as one equal unit. Man was meant to function with a woman by his side, and vice versa. Women were meant to function. Now that I don't want to spew into a tangent, but I will. Has anybody ever noticed that when people start talking about this, they're more again on the left, but when people start to talk about particularly feminism, when they address women, they never say women. They never say the word WOMEN. They always say woman. Why is that? I've always wondered about that. If you search around long enough, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. Most of these assholes never refer to it as women. They always say woman. They always say the singular of woman. They never say women in the plural. I always found that kind of weird. Anyway, getting back on topic. Right, going back to the Garden of Eden, men and women were set to function as one unit. That's what is typically and traditionally seen in a Christian marriage, right, or in a kind of a right wing conservative way. That's what's seen as a traditional marriage: a man and a woman, of course, with the kids functioning as a nuclear family unit. So if you want to go down this whole theological rabbit hole, you would kind of see that, well, in the Garden of Eden, uh, the serpent tempted Eve. He tempted the female first. And that was kind of a bigger ploy when you really think about it, because he's like, okay, well, the enemy, whoever you want to say, Satan, the devil, whatever, he kind of saw it as, well, what's the fundamental, basic building block division that I can create to cause havoc in, God's perfect creation? That is, of course, to drive a wedge between men and women. And I think that has kind of proliferated down through the centuries. Again, even if you don't want to take a spiritual theological angle to it, you can really see that this is what the establishment is trying to do. What better way to destroy civilization as a whole than to take its two main components and split them apart permanently? That's what I think is the deep. People want to say, "Oh, you're going into a conspiratorial age. You're a conspiracy theorist." Da 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 da. What's the old saying? What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth? About 6 fucking months. And I firmly hold to that anecdote. But anyway, like I was saying, um, yeah, I mean, it kind of makes logical sense for a government or a worldwide global cabal, whatever you want to call it. What is the best way for them to destroy modern day civilization in really any form? And that is to take man, turn him against women, and women turn her, or turn them against men. Get the two genders to hate each other, and by definition, you not only destroy civilization, you destroy mankind itself. And as wild as it may sound, that's what I think these assholes are really trying to do. They are trying to not only take civilization and tear it asunder from its very roots, they are trying in many ways to destroy the human race itself. Why? I I can't really speculate. I mean, there are always ideas and wild theories out there, but I think it's for a much sinister purpose, or excuse me, a much more sinister purpose, where they want to rebuild not only civilization, they want to remake human society, the human race itself into something totally new, totally different. What is always the mantra when you see leftists and feminists? They want to tear down the patriarchy. They want to tear down all that's come before. It's because these people, they hate any semblance of tradition. They are so narcissistic, they are so inward looking. They think that not only the world but the universe revolves around them and their ideology, that they want to take any semblance of the past. And yes, I do think it is a conspiracy against Christianity in and of itself. Again, not going on a theological tangent here, but they see that as the very building blocks of, most prominently Western culture, Western society is Christianity. So what they do is they want to take all semblance of old tradition, tear it down to fit their modern interpretation of how things should go. Take things that were once held sacred by conservatives and by traditionalists, turn it upside down on its head, and in a very real way have a real topsy-turvy type world. Men on the bottom, women on top, whatever have you, because they want to fundamentally shake up what we've known for eons, centuries, millennia, whatever the case is, to fit their modern narrative of how things should go. Because again, they hate the idea of tradition. They hate the idea of men leading the way and women, kind of not necessarily following, but to follow in the man's stead, because they know that that's the way civilization has always worked. I will do a future video which I will entitle, "Men Built Civilization." Period. There's no arguing that. But that just goes back to the whole thing where, modern civilization has a set template, it has a set formula. Men build, women moderate, right? And that's the way that it's always gone. You think about, go back to caveman times, right? Neolithic times, hunter gatherer times. And what did men do? They went out, they hunted for the food, right? They brought it back. They took care of their families in that way. And women, gathered the nuts and the berries, and they took care of the kids. And from that, kind of very humble beginnings grew into modern day civilizations throughout time. You get some of the bigger city states, ancient Sumer, ancient Babylon, and that just grew into our modern day world. And you know, for all these civilizations that have existed, it always started from those very fundamental roots. Men built, women moderated. Men built, women helped, right? You cannot take that very known formula, that very set formula that's proven to work time and time and time again, and kind of flip it on its head, where women are now the builders and men are, these subservient gatherers. They are the subservient, stay at home dads or husbands who raise. It doesn't fucking work that way. It never will. It never can work that way, right? And again, I don't. I want to make a totally separate video when it comes to this, but that's what I think is kind of the building blocks of what the establishment is trying to do. They realize that in order to destroy human civilization on a very fundamental, organic, molecular level, if you want to go that far, is you have to take men and pit them against women, and women and pit them against men. And civilization itself will crumble as a result, right? So, call it a conspiracy theory, call it whatever you want. That's what I truly believe is going on. And of course, where did those seeds begin? Well, they began in the modern day ideology of feminism. Uh, that's where I think this really, very sinister cult of just man hating came from, right? And that was the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate goal. And I think we've gotten pretty far, or they have gotten pretty far when it comes to their plans, in just destroying society. I firmly believe in many ways that they've succeeded. I don't think there is a way back from this. I truly think that too much damage has been wrought, too much damage has been caused. Chaos has just been sown so deep in the minds of people. The what do they call it, the institutional rot has just been there for so long. It is metastasized like a cancer, that I really don't think that there's any going back from this. I really don't. Call me a pessimist, call me a cynic. That's what I firmly believe. I think we're just we're just too far gone. And in many ways, we let it get this bad. We let it get this far because we didn't want to start confronting other people. People were throwing it in our faces for so long that we were the wrong ones. that, we were the ones that were thinking, backwards and what do they call it, archaic type of thinking, that we just shut our mouths and we were told to be wallflowers, shut the fuck up and just get with the program, right? And we let that kind of carry on for so long that I think a few years ago, many years ago, in fact, we reached a point of no return. So do with that what you will. That's just my thoughts on that, guys. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Um, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but tell me what you think. All right. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.